Well, good evening. This is our, I don't know the how manyth uh, um, webinar with the pioneers from the three principles. Tonight, our guest is Ken Manning. Ken has been interested in finding simple solutions to help people to be at their best for as long as he can remember. He pursued 3 degrees of psychology from Brown University, Lesley College, and the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. He practiced as a clinical psychologist for 20 years. In parallel to his career in psychology, Ken has also a strong background in business, including roles in various startups as a national sales manager, director of marketing, and advisory board member. He co-founded with his son-in-law a successful software development company, which he still leads. In 1999, he began innovating ways to bring insight principles into the corporate world and joined with partner Robin Charbit to form their company Insight Principles. And it's been a success ever since, I think. Ken has been married for over 30 years, has 2 stepdaughters, a son, and 5 grandchildren. I'm envious of you. He plays piano, loves the outdoors, and has all kinds of sports and exercise, travel, photography, woodworking, and spending time with family and friends. Ken, well, we've met more often. Especially I've taken part in one of your trainings. How would you feel that the Insight Principles or 3 principles have changed your way of looking at business in the last 5 or 10 years?
What was that last word that you said?
The last 5 to 10 years towards business environments.
I'm not sure how to answer the question.
It's a tricky one, yeah, and I understand. Let's try something.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, what I'm looking for is the world is constantly moving and changing all the time, and that must have had some kind of influence on how you look at the implementation of the principles or insight principles into business environments. And as you well, if you compare it to the work you did, for instance, for British Aerospace, which is a long time ago now, and nowadays, if you compare those two approaches, what do you do differently?
Oh, well, at BAE, the Pranskys were leading that program.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a very strong approach about getting people to have deep spiritual and emotional transformations.
Mm-hmm.
We, in our company, we like when that happens,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't target that as a have to happen, as something that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people that we run into in corporations are not looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
But they can get a great deal of benefit from understanding how the mind works.
Mm-hmm.
And have all kinds of transformations. The whole spectrum of what people can transform, we've seen all over the place. So
Mm-hmm.
we have I guess one of the things that's really central about our approach is we we trust that people already know what they need to know about how the mind works somewhere inside of them.
Mhm.
So it's not our job to get the knowledge into them. It's more fun to try to bring it out in them and help them realize they already know it at some level.
And that way you get to much quicker to results, probably.
Well, we get to our results. Sometimes they're quick, sometimes they're not so quick, but we find it's a very respectful approach.
Yeah.
So we use that approach. And
Mhm.
because in the business world, people are very smart. They like to think for themselves. They're not usually looking for a guru or a spiritual teacher or a psychologist.
Mhm.
They're just looking for whatever they can get better business results. So we respect where they're living and where they're focusing. And we say, listen, we have this great knowledge that's available for you if you want to partake of it. And
Mhm.
here's why you would benefit from partaking of it. And a good proportion of people get interested. So we are relatively busy.
Mhm.
Am I answering your question?
Yeah, yeah, you are. Excellently. So it's you really chose a different approach than the Prensky's did at the BAE experience. Let's call it that way. Um,
We're different people, so everybody has to kind of bring the principles to the world through themselves. So my partner Robin and I, we're not the same as the Pranskys, so we have different backgrounds and we have different approach and different. We've had different insights and different experiences, so that's what we bring.
mhm.
So of course it's going to have to be different. If any of you did the same thing, you'd do it differently as well.
Absolutely, and that's what I always tell other people. Also, it's you have this your own specific version of the principles or the insights we are bringing forward,
Yeah,
and they are specific to you, which is
yeah.
good, which is good in itself. And I think, well, I'm not sure, but maybe you can confirm that. I think that's what Sid also intended.
Yeah, Sid said to us once, he said, listen, you have to see it for yourself,
Hmm.
and then you have to say it your way.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that? How you experienced that when you were trained by Sid as well? I think I was told, and I'm not.
Yeah, I had a lot of direct experience with Sid.
Hmm.
And I was on the faculty in the 90s. We brought together 15 psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers to kind of make the principles into a psychotherapy,
Hmm.
psychological approach. So I was on the faculty for quite a number of years. So,
Was it?
we all supported each other and helped each other see things. And Sid would come and spend time with us, and I
Hmm.
had some private time with Sid. Um, I think what Sid saw was way beyond what any of us in our ordinary consciousness
Absolutely.
can can even imagine.
Hmm.
So hanging out with Sid uh, would stretch my imagination and my level of consciousness beyond what was ordinary for me.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
I can't say I came anywhere close to what he experienced, but he would clearly say to us, listen, until you see the truth, it's all guesswork,
Hmm.
all construct, or it's all heady stuff. So there is truth. It's just that we're not that equipped to see it in our egos and in our intellects.
Yeah.
So I think I've had moments of seeing the truth beyond my own thinking. but then I would only know so by referring it back to my own thinking. So, I think once you've had an enlightenment experience like he did, you know something different. You know
Mm,
there's a whole other place to be and look from, and there's a whole other reality than what we ordinarily see.
mm,
So I can't claim to know what he experienced, but I know it's beyond what I've experienced.
mhm,
But then, there are little bits, little wisps, little moments, little aspects of what I have seen that I know are uh, closer to the truth than what I ordinarily think.
mhm,
And I think you just have to experience whatever truth or aspects of the truth you can find yourself,
mhm.
and then live from them, and then talk to other people about what you've seen.
Absolutely so, absolutely true as far as I'm concerned. And it's so important that you keep on exchanging with other people just to keep learning and developing, because this is a lifelong study, probably.
Yeah, I've
Um,
had it for 32 years now.
yeah, and I'm relatively new to the principles. I've only
Yeah,
used
I
it
am too.
5 years. Yeah, 5 years of yes. You have unimaginable longer experience than I do. So
Yeah, but I don't feel any farther along than anybody else.
yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot more experience trying to talk about it, but that doesn't mean I'm any further along.
No, that's true. That's true. And the funny thing is, when you start talking about it, you really get better at it at some stage, and you find new openings to it. And it's amazing. And last week I was walking the dog, and I met this guy from the neighborhood who was also walking his dog, and we had a chat while walking the dogs. And he's a better manager. And he just asked me, "What you doing?" "Oh, I'm contemplating some stuff. I'm starting to write a book." And oh, what's it about? Well, it's about resilience. Okay. Um, how do you see that? Well, we had a chat, and he said, "Oh, wow, that's quite new." No, it's not new. It's very old. But the problem is we've almost forgotten about it, and we all have it. The problem is we don't know it. That's why it seems new. Okay, that's interesting. I'd like a copy of that book if it's finished. Okay, I only written four chapters, so I have a long way to go still. But the funny thing is, at some stage, you start making a connection with people with this understanding, and the trick is to learn to relate to what their interests are, and that's exactly what you're doing. I think much better than most of us do.
Well, we discovered at some point along the line, or I discovered at some point along the line that people are not actually interested in what I have to say.
Yeah,
They're interested in what's useful for themselves.
yeah.
So if what I have to say would be useful to them, they're interested. But for me to just talk about what I'm interested in, why would they want to know that?
Mhm.
I mean, who wants to know what somebody else is excited about? Unless it's useful to you. I mean, unless you're close and you're friends and you're in family.
Yeah. And how did you develop that understanding during the years so on? Because it must have been in the beginning, must have been quite complicated.
Well, I developed that understanding by pissing people off.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Well, I wanted to share with them this great stuff that I learned. So I would, talk to them about this great stuff that I learned up until the point I realized they were not actually interested in hearing about it. And then I realized, oh, people don't actually want to hear about the stuff that I learned unless it's useful for them.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started wondering, well, what would be useful to people?
Yeah.
And then I started to understand that I do have something to offer people, but it has to be framed in their language and in their world in a way that's useful for them. Otherwise, why would they care about the insights that I had?
Mm-hmm. So the trick is really to relate to someone else, try to find out what's eating him or her, or what is he or
Or
she
what's
worrying
happening
about.
in their world, and
Yeah.
would you like help with that, or can I
Yeah.
help you with that, or I see something that maybe you could benefit from. Would you like me to tell you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had this incredible insight. I was at a training with Sid, and he said something that really struck me. I had this incredible insight. It was like unbelievable. It was like I'd seen God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I had this dream at night, which was beyond any dream I've ever had. And it was, I knew I saw something about the soul and light and the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was ecstatic. I was in this ecstatic, excited state, and I was seeing all this stuff. So I went to sit up to Sid the next day. And I remember I could still see it in my mind. I had to tell him my insight from the day before and the dream that I had and what it meant and all this stuff. And I told him the whole thing. It must have lasted about 2 minutes. And he looks at me and he says, "You'll have other insights." And he walks away.
Oh my God. He wasn't impressed.
Well, it's not that he was impressed or not impressed. I mean, compared to what he experienced, he was definitely not impressed.
No.
But but the point was, what I took away from it was why would somebody else be excited about my insights?
Yeah, yeah, and that's valuable. That's very valuable. Yeah, yeah. I was painting the house a few weeks ago, and I was on the scaffolding and sanding and cleaning and painting and so on. I was listening to podcasts and was listening to Rupert Spira, and he was talking to Don Hoffman, who's he's a scientist, and they were talking about this wisdom we all have, and where it resides more or less. And they said, well, it's not within the time space area, if I put it correctly. It's somewhere behind. We have math to calculate that. We have math to calculate it. The problem is only it's going from there. But it's something like what Beethoven and Bach and Rembrandt and well, all these really advanced people had, and Escher and no, you name them. They have some way a connection to that other sphere where that knowledge is, where you and then they have to translate it into the time space zone, and that's the trick really. And that was quite revealing for me. Oh wait a minute, yeah, that makes sense. It's something like that, and I don't know what it is. Doesn't matter really, but it makes sense. That was quite a nice insight for me too, to try and understand it. Well, try. We don't get much further than trying properly. So, how did you experience? How did you get to know Sid? He came to the faculty. Was it in Miami or was it in a different area?
I was in Laconer.
The corner, okay, near the Prensky's. Yeah.
A friend of mine who was a friend of Dickon
Okay.
brought me to a training
Mm-hmm.
in Laconer.
Okay.
That's how I got introduced to it. Well, is there anything anybody else wants to know or anything you're curious about or?
Yeah, feel free to ask questions if you like. Anyone?
Sure. If anybody else has something, I'm very curious to hear about it. Hi, Ken. Really nice to see you alive. Hey. Um, I had a brief look at the book that you and Sandy and
Robin.
Robin wrote, and I happened to land on the page where you describe um, the experience with your father, and I just read that before the meeting. It really hit me. Um, so that was quite beautiful, and I didn't have any questions on that one. I just remember reading that for the first time. It's where you describe how having an understanding of how the mind works is very helpful, even in challenging situations in life. um, so I wanted to just share that and appreciate it and say thank you. Um, that was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Zooming out again to this particular meeting and this moment here, I was wondering in your trajectory in life where you're going, watching what's happening in the principles world, as far as from your perspective. I was wondering if when you look around to all these people getting to know the principles and learning about it and having their own thing with it and all those patterns that roll out. Is there something that you would wish was heading in a different direction? So, for example, I remember Keith telling a story about how Sid was not particularly a big fan of the internet and the amount of information being spread, because it's not necessarily about the amount of information; it's about the the message itself. Um, and I just wanted to ask you that. I'm not sure if there's an answer to that question, but from your perspective, is there something that you see happening that you would say, well, hey, if we wouldn't do this, this would go in a different direction?
Well, I can't really speak for the Three Principles community. I'm not immersed in it, so I don't think I'm qualified to comment on it. I just wish Sid was still alive
I will.
because uh, the mind is not with the principles. The mind is a conceptual tool that we use to orient ourselves. So we can't help but use language and ego to try to teach what we think we know about the principles. And any teaching that has a spiritual root will try to hearken back to the truth that's on the other side of our minds and beyond our minds and beyond our egos. So, we have Sid's books and tapes and videos, which are really good. But uh, there's nothing like having the source around to smack us around when we go off track. So we can try and smack ourselves around or smack each other around, but who are we really to say what the deeper truth is? In the pandemic, we had a whole year of programs with companies set up and they all got canceled. And we realized at some point the pandemic wasn't going to go away. So we had to figure out how to do everything online. And we worked with, a lot of people online since the pandemic got started. So that's been a real blessing. And there's been a lot of great impact we've been able to have with people online.
Mm.
But then it's not the same as being in person. So, there's always a trade-off in this world. Probably, I think Rupert Spirit talks about this too. In the world of duality, there's trade-offs everywhere. It's always trade-offs. So the internet is a great advantage and it's a disadvantage at the same time, because people feel like they have gotten to know something, but who knows how deep it really was. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting anywhere close to your question, Hank, but just what come to mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Just curious what came up for you and said, yeah.
There's a lot of great people doing great stuff, and there's a lot of new people teaching the principles, which I think is exciting and scary. And I'm sure they're all doing their best. And it's great to be fresh. So a lot of people who are really fresh with the principles probably are closer to the truth than us old timers who think we know something. So who knows?
So why do we revert back to you every time?
I'm sorry?
Why do we revert back to you every time?
What do you mean?
Well, we are coming back to as we call them, the pioneers of 3P, just to try and hear where the more or less original stuff comes from.
Uh-huh.
And so we started this program also to raise the interest in the principles in the Netherlands. We do that for the Dutch community, and hopefully we bring better and more clear information about the principles, and also from various sources, various people. So the messages will be different. Well, they are different.
Yeah.
They are very different. You can't compare the webinars we do here all the time. And so my question is, why do we do that? Is that because we don't trust ourselves? Is that because we want to hear the specifics you experience when still having access to SID? And we don't have that, of course. And most of us, at least in the Netherlands, most of us haven't, because it was long there before we started here in the Netherlands. I think we started about 6 or 7 years ago, something like that, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know exactly when there's a couple of ladies who started here in the Netherlands, and I don't know who else was involved already in that in an earlier stage. We're trying to find out how can we connect to this understanding and make it as pure as possible. That's I think we were trying to do here, and I think the importance of this can bring immense improvements in the way people and organizations are doing business. And it's still so difficult to grasp it in such a way that it will land easily in people and in organizations. You really have to skill yourself quite a bit to get the message across, as I did successfully last week, for instance. And I was astonished by it. So it's and I drew the conclusion that this is simple but difficult to implement.
Well, what's simple, I think, is the truth. The truth is
Yeah,
really simple.
absolutely.
Everything we think about it is not simple.
That's true. Absolutely. The problem is we have this thinking ability, and we think everything through. And the problem is we can't exist without our thinking, really.
Or thinking is a really valuable resource.
Yeah.
It's just not the truth.
That's correct. I
So,
try.
so,
Yeah.
so you know, the thing I like about being around the old timers
Hmm.
is that when you've had a lot of experience, um, what do I mean by experience? I think when you have a mental framework of the principles,
Hmm.
and then you have an initial understanding
Hmm.
of the principles. Um, you start experiencing life with different perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So you actually have new experiences.
Yeah.
So let's say you're in a bad mood one day,
Hmm.
and you understand uh, that thought has something to do with how you feel about things. And then you notice you've been in a really bad mood for a while. Well, if your understanding comes back to mind, you start having an experience of, oh, I'm in a bad mood and I don't need to take it seriously. And this too shall pass.
Yeah.
So then you have an experience. You have an experience that you're not your mood. And you're not your feelings.
No. Okay.
And you're not your thinking either.
No, there's something deeper than that.
There's something more essential than that.
Yeah.
So you have this, this experience of being something more essential. Now, over time, you have more and more of these kind of experiences, and they're not mental experiences. I mean, their mind is involved, but it's more of a deeper kind of soulful knowing.
Yeah. It's your awareness, really.
So the thing I like about hanging around the old timers is that, there's this sense of knowing that is very peaceful to be around.
Hmm.
And that reminds us that we can be peaceful no matter what.
Yeah.
And the understanding is just sort of the doorway into that space. But in that space, you can have a lot of experience where you just know that, you could say it a million different ways. That life is inside out, that it's all thought, that it's a dream, that it's a beautiful dream, that it's all love, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
You could say a million different things about it. But there's this knowing, and that's what I like about being around the old timers, because that there's this sense of knowing that doesn't require any explanation.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, the thing about being with Sid was that Sid knew way beyond anything that we know. So he was sitting in a knowing that was beyond what we can imagine.
Hmm.
You can only have that knowing through experience. And since I haven't had the experience and nobody else that I know has had that experience, we're imagining, but
Hmm.
it's not the same as knowing. But there's a quality of knowing that Sid had that you just get by osmosis from being with him and being in interactions with him. So the interaction part is gone now. but the knowing is there on the tapes and it's in the videos.
Mm.
So if you listen or watch the videos with the attitude of trying to feel what it is that he knew and really go beyond the words, you can get a lot of that.
Mm.
You can get that knowing in you. And then you notice in your day-to-day that that knowing is really there. And you experience life in the context of that knowing, and you feel it.
Mm.
And that adds to your experience of yourself.
Mm. Beautiful.
And what we learn, it's very humbling to be around Sid, because we all knew we had no clue, really had no clue what he experienced. It was very humbling. So we knew we had no clue. But there was this feeling or this sense of being able to know that was beyond our mind, beyond our intellect. So we got oriented to that space. I missed that in having Sid around big time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't orient people to that space unless you know this. You come from that space, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Oh, we all have bits of that in ourselves, and I try to anchor myself in that when I'm teaching. But the real power of the delivery doesn't come from what you say. It comes from what you actually know. You can say a million things, but if you don't really know it, it's not going to have the same impact. If you just know a little bit, and then you say a little bit, but you're in that space of knowing it when you're saying it,
Mm.
that has the likelihood of impact way more than anything else.
Mm.
Now, that's how Sid was all the time, because he just obviously knew fully, completely what he was talking about. So when I listen to Sid now, I just try to tune into what could he possibly know that enables him to say what he's saying.
Mm.
Not on a content level, but on an experience level.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Chip Chipman once said, there's no information in the words, there's information in the feeling. Heat transfers. And that's what I'm starting to notice as well. There's not so much information in the words you are, because I notice with myself that I start using different stories every time. I don't have a similar story. I used to have, when I started with principles, I had this story about, now it's just for the situation. And I talk to people about their situation really, and they get out the door quite happy. So it's something is working there. I don't know what it's working, but I don't care really, as long as I get the feeling across. And there's this wonderful practice from Rupert Spira. He's called the exercise to direct awakening, which brings you to your awareness, which shows you that you are nothing but awareness. And that's all there is to it. The rest is all mumbo jumbo, really. It's nonsense. It's just your experience, which is created through your senses and through your thinking and so on and so on. But that's not what it's about. It's about what you are really. I can't find the real word. There's no word for that. It's just what you are aware of. And that awareness doesn't judge. It doesn't bring anything forward. It's just watching. And I think somewhere over there lies this bridge to this wisdom component we all have, which you sometimes have when you're taking a shower in the morning and say, oh yeah, of course, that's how I should do that. And it helps me a lot just to relax into what's going on and not to pay too much attention to what my thinking tells me. Most of the time, my thinking tells me the wrong things. And it's so much valuable, more valuable just to listen to what comes up. And sometimes, always something comes up. It's not sometimes, it's always. And the funny thing is, it's so great to experience that, because it gives your life so much more calmness and so much more being at ease with almost any situation, really. Okay, something will happen. It's okay. We'll see. Just relax. And that's so powerful, because then you can, when something happens, you can choose what you do. You can do it, or you can't do it. Or you won't do it. It's up to you. And the funny thing then is that we enjoy life much more that way. It's much more fun, much more rewarding, much more loving. So yeah, I can fully relate to what you're selling, what you're telling, and then what's going on here. Wonderful. Anyone else? Because I'm talking a lot here.
I've got a different direction available. Just wondering, Ken, a few years ago, you and Robin and Sandy had the direction of, when you have a presentation or you enter a company, there's three main points. Of course, there's a whole thing behind it, but there's three main points. The mind only works one way. The mind's designed for success, and the deeper that you see that, I forgot what the last part was, but those 3 points. And I was wondering,
The more productive and happy you'll be.
yeah, thank you. Is that still, are those still the three, like, how do you feel currently about that direction? Are you still walking that path, or has it, like with the principles, usually things fall off the wagon because they don't longer seem necessary. But in these cases, they seem pretty pointy. So I was wondering, are they still pretty pointy for you guys, or how do you feel about it?
The first two, it's really two points. That the mind only works one way, from the inside out, and that we're designed for success. It's really the three principles: mind, consciousness, and thought. The first one is just mind and consciousness. Thought and consciousness. The second one is really about mind. So it's our language for the business environment that's not looking for psychological or spiritual focus. And then the third point, the deeper you see these things, the more productive and happy you're going to be, is really why you're in the program.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
And the deeper the reason why I say the deeper you see these things is to get them engaged, to really keep seeing it deeper and deeper.
Yeah. So the first 2 points are basically principle based. You're basically saying,
It's our business language for the three principles.
yeah. Oh, I hadn't seen that. Thank you. That's that's pretty smart.
It's a point in itself.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's big news for people that the mind is designed for success.
Yeah.
I mean, most people are successful to some degree, but they wouldn't attribute the success to the way the mind is, the way the mind is. They give success, they blame their success on their egos, not on their gifts that were given at birth. So it's big news that, you know, you're successful because you're designed to be successful. And the other thing is that most psychology would suggest that your mind is not designed for success. Your mind is a problem. So come and spend a few years with me and I'll dig into all the problems and show you why all your mind is really your problem.
And you're no step further. I read an article somewhere. I think it was from Judith Setchman and one of our colleagues. They tell psychology has it backwards.
Yeah, it was Judy and Christine Heath. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I think they wrote a book even, I think, about it, didn't they?
I don't know. I saw a flyer for one of a workshop they were running that had that title.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. How do you relate to that?
To what?
To the title they use, the psychology has it backwards. As you as a PhD in psychology.
Well, I don't know. I think it's a cute title.
Okay.
I don't know what to say. I don't know about being backwards. I think psychology went down the wrong route.
Mm-hmm.
But given the outside in nature of delusion, and given the ignorance of childhood development
Mm-hmm.
that existed in the 1890s,
Mm-hmm.
and Freud, as a neurologist, caught on to psychological dimension from an outside-in point of view, he was brilliant at developing an understanding of human development throughout the stages of development.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all outside in. Freud is famous for having said, the purpose of psychology is to take people who are completely miserable and make them ordinarily unhappy. Hang on one second.
Calvin just called.
Yeah.
His mom had an accident in his driveway. Not sure if they call it street.
Okay.
So if you could take the call.
I will. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Back.
Okay.
So you know, if you look at from outside in versus inside out, that's backwards.
Mm-hmm.
But I think psychology is a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
as a big summary, it's not bad. So, and I think there's a great deal of value in a lot of what the psychology profession has experienced and identified.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a beautiful way to cut through it to something really simple and effective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wonderful.
How about you, Gaston? Anything on your mind?
Are you talking about Freud? And I'm studying analytical psychology from Jung, according to Jung.
Uh-huh.
Is there a difference between the approach of Jung versus the principles?
Oh, yeah. Huge.
Yeah. Is Jung also outside in?
Hold on a second, I have to close my door.
Yeah, sure.
Um, I don't, I think Jung is kind of mixed.
Yeah.
Jung's intuition about archetypes and the spiritual dimension to life,
Mhm. And consciousness.
I think is a beautifully deep and rich exploration. But then the application of it to people in the therapy world is embedded in an outside-in framework. So the Jungian therapies that I've been aware of straddle both,
Hmm.
but in a way that makes the archetypes really interesting, but it muddies the water on where our experiences come from.
Mhm.
Anyway, I've got to go in 2 minutes because I've got another meeting. So
All right.
just want to say this has been
Thank
really
you.
Thanks,
great
Ken.
to work with you guys.
Thank you very much, Ken. It was wonderful to have you here.
Any last thing that I can be helpful with?
Go ahead, please. One little thing, and I know Sid was very much against writing down the principles or anything about the principles, and he didn't want to be an object or something like that, or a thing, or something like that. Can you elaborate on that?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay. If you're looking at the descriptions Sid wrote, if you look at the Gardner books and so on, if you read the books again, they're all fiction books, but they have the message in it. And then there were people who were trying to make principles into a practice. And I heard, and I'm not sure about this, but I heard that Sid wasn't happy about it.
Well, in the faculty in the 90s, we came up with this set of things called the core concepts.
Mm-hmm.
He really didn't like that.
Anyway, that's what I heard too, indeed, and I'm
He didn't like that. But he wrote the book The Missing Link.
yeah, but
So he tried his best to describe the principles in a somewhat poetic way in that book.
I think it's his best book, really.
It's the essential.
Yeah.
Took him 25 years to write that book.
Wow.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I gotta go, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks very much, Ken.
Have a great day.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Wonderful day, and thank you for being here.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Dank.